The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DNI.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
What do you get when you mix a smug TV host with a confused governor who leads like he's lost in a Target parking lot? You get Greg Gutfeld tearing into Tim Walz like a gluten-free piñata at a meat lover's party. From failed policies to government confusion, Gutfeld turns Minnesota's leadership into a non-stop comedy show. Don't go anywhere. This roast is hotter than Tim's approval rating is cold, and it's just as brutal as it is funny.
Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there!" and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Oh, Tim Walz. If political leadership were a buffet, he'd be the lukewarm mashed potatoes no one asked for but still ended up on your plate bland. Unnecessary, and oddly still hanging around. Then there's Greg Gutfeld, using sarcasm like a chainsaw in a fireworks store, tearing through Walz's actions like a hyper-Dexter doing stand-up. This isn't really leadership, it's more like messy performance art. If the art was finger painting with spoiled mayonnaise.
Exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said that he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. This is the guy who pushes a hoax about sex on a couch. And then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy cunt.
Let's be honest, Tim Walz governing Minnesota is like watching a substitute teacher try to control a room full of caffeinated raccoons. He talks like a guy who read Leadership for Dummies and thought, yes, this is my entire political philosophy, now. And the execution, oh, it's flawless. If your goal is to turn the land of 10,000 lakes into the land of 10,000 bad ideas.
Recently, Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who.
Greg Gutfeld didn't even have to try hard to make fun of Tim Walz. It was like making fun of someone who wears Crocs to a job interview while blindfolded. Walz looked totally unprepared, like he brought a kazoo and a whiteboard that just said, feelings to a debate. He basically asked to be made fun of, handing Gutfeld an easy chance and even saying, go all out. At this point, it's not even comedy, it's like a sarcasm contest. And Walz showed up with glitter glue and a just for trying ribbon.
Strange.
Oh, he's strange.
He is strange. Him and I are the same age. How does he look so much younger?
No, he's a strange guy.
Strange.
He called up years ago. I was in the White House, and he said, my house is being surrounded by people with American flags. I said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? He said, I think they're going to attack me. But this was during the riots and everything else. They were MAGA people. They like the American flag, all right? And they also had Trump. And I said, how do you know? There were about 15,000, he said. He said, could you put out a word like that I'm your friend? I don't even know him, but that's the only time I ever spoke to him. And if you look back long ago, tweets before Truth, tweets long ago, I put out a statement. He's a good man, the governor. He's on our side. I didn't know him, but I didn't want him to get hurt. And everybody put down their flags and they left. Yes. He said it was a miracle. He said it was a miracle.
Let's start with the economy. Tim Walz looked at inflation, unemployment, and businesses leaving the state and seemed to think, you know what might help? More taxes. It's like he wants to tax oxygen, smiles, and even people just thinking about moving to South Dakota. Businesses are fleeing Minnesota like it's a haunted house made entirely of COVID, mandates, and social justice PowerPoints. And then there's Gutfeld, who shredded Walz's economic policies like a raccoon going through a compost bin. He basically shouted, "How do you make California look like a capitalist paradise in comparison?" The only things growing in Minnesota under Walz are government paperwork and the middle class's collective headache. Now, on to crime. Walz approaches public safety like a toddler playing with matches, naive, reckless, and sure to end with sirens. His solution to rising crime: blame society, hold hands, and hope criminals are moved by interpretive dance. It's like handing out scented candles during a house fire.
Same bad cocaine, but Kamala can't speak, he can't speak, Biden was so high he couldn't remember anything. Like, this is literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show, and I said this in the pod. He's a clown without a circus.
He doesn't even need makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for? Yeah. I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yes.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months.
Meanwhile, Gutfeld is out here doing stand-up with statistics. He practically held up a map of Minnesota with "Here be carjackings" scrawled over the Twin Cities. He joked that Walz's crime strategy is like a mall cop trying to stop a riot, with a kazoo and a clipboard. If Tim Walz were in charge of national security, he said, we'd all be speaking Russian by next week, and education. Let's dive into that glittering dumpster fire. Walz, who used to be a teacher, naturally has turned Minnesota classrooms into temples of woke word salad. Forget math and science. Kids now get graded on how well they can spot microaggressions and build safe spaces out of popsicle sticks. Gutfeld didn't just sprinkle in sarcasm. He went full blast. The only test students in Minnesota are passing is the How to Be perpetually offended exam. Under Walz, classrooms have shifted from learning centers to performance art stages. There's no detention anymore, just participation trophies and TikTok therapy sessions.
Especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can you see the...
And can we please talk about the COVID policies? Oh boy. Tim Walz treated the pandemic like it was his big audition for America's next top authoritarian. Shut down everything. Arrest bar owners. Fine churches. But protests, those were spiritually essential. Apparently, the virus could tell the difference between a family dinner and a political demonstration. Who knew? Greg Gutfeld couldn't resist that buffet of hypocrisy. He pointed out that Walz shut down Grandma's bingo night, but opened the streets for mass protests as long as they included at least one Marxist chant and a papier. MCH puppet. This wasn't public health policy, it was interpretive theater with a clipboard. And let's not even start on the budget surplus. Minnesota had a surplus so massive that even Tim Walz couldn't pretend it wasn't there. So naturally, instead of returning it to the taxpayers, the people who actually earned it, he treated it like monopoly money at a government garage sale. Let's expand bureaucracy, hire more diversity consultants, and maybe even commission a taxpayer mural of himself looking contemplative.
Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. that humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every.
Gutfeld nearly passed out from the irony. Walz spending a surplus, he quipped, is like giving a toddler a credit card and asking him to stick to the essentials. Sure, Timby, cause clearly the Department of Overregulation, desperately, needed that new espresso machine and the taxpayer-funded gender equity executive yoga retreat. And speaking of bureaucracy, Tim Walz has turned red tape into a competitive sport. In Minnesota, you can't even open a lemonade stand without 14 permits, a background check, and an official pronoun declaration. It's like Soviet Minnesota just with better branding and worse results. Gutfeld painted Walz as a bureaucratic gymnast, twisting and flipping through regulations like he's trying to win gold in tax code floor routine. Every decision involves more spins and contortions than a Cirque du Soleil show about government inefficiency. And then there's his oddly intense obsession with Gavin Newsom. It's like Walz has a full-blown California crush, working overtime to turn Minneapolis into San Francisco's colder, less competent cousin.
Tim Walz vomits more nonsense.
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Maybe it's an adult like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back. This is a weak, cruel man that takes it out and punches down on people.
Wow. Oh. Jamie.
What a
Painful,
douchebag,
huh?
Greg. That was absolutely painful. He was the keynote speaker at this conference. Can you imagine having to watch more of that?
He watches Gavin Newsom torch California like a scented candle made of bad policy and thinks, brilliant. But what if I add frostbite and subtract job opportunities? It's like he's reading from the West Coast disaster script only now. It's performed in snow boots, with fewer vowels and even higher property taxes. Gutfeld didn't hold back. If Gavin Newsom is a walking shampoo ad with the self-esteem of a Bond villain, he said, then Tim Walz is his understudy who wandered in halfway through the play and started improvising in Pig Latin. Walz struts around like the love child of Bernie Sanders and a malfunctioning traffic light, pretending to be a progressive savior, while tripping over every department he touches, and transportation. Please. The man pitched a multi-million-dollar bullet train that might be finished around the same time dinosaurs come back. Meanwhile, Minnesota roads look like a post-apocalyptic Mario Kart track, and residents are just hoping their suspension systems live past 30. But Walz, he's too busy selling fantasy trains like he's auditioning for Hogwarts, while real infrastructure crumbles like gluten.
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath, you don't want to see.
And Greg Gutfeld. He rolled his eyes so hard they probably registered on the Richter scale. The sarcasm was so thick it needed its own zip code. Oh, brilliant move. Tim, let's toss common sense in the recycling bin and invest billions into Elon Musk fan fiction on rails, because nothing says fiscal responsibility like a bullet train to nowhere slower than a DMV line, and less useful than a solar-powered flashlight in January. Then there are Walz's media appearances. Picture a man cosplaying as a competent leader, delivering speeches with the clarity of a dial-up modem submerged in a fish tank. He talks in endless, looping circles like a GPS stuck in recalculating mode. Somewhere off-camera, his advisors are frantically waving flashcards and flares. Just hoping he lands a coherent point, Gutfeld tore into it like a drunk poet at slam night. Watching Walz explain policy is like watching a raccoon try Morse code with oven mitts. Confusing, chaotic, and somehow still convinced it worked. It's not just awkward, It's a full-on Olympic event in verbal gymnastics that absolutely no one asked to see.
Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
And when the heat's on, Tim Walz doesn't just pivot, he pirouettes like a ballerina hopped up on 5 Red Bulls and a subscription to The Atlantic. Ask him about skyrocketing crime. And suddenly he's passionately explaining how adding more bike lanes will reduce felony charges. Mention the economy circling the drain. And he launches into a lecture on gender-neutral parking lots and the emotional trauma of asphalt. Management. This isn't leadership, it's interpretive policy theater, where every real issue is met with a TED Talk about feelings and a slideshow on community healing through ukulele circles. Gutfeld nailed it. Walz is basically a magic 8-ball in orthopedic shoes. Shake him, and the answer is always some vague nonsense involving intersectional frameworks or equity gardening. And the branding. Don't even get started. Walz struts around like a down-home farm dad, but his idea of roughing it is drinking almond milk without a paper straw. He's the guy at a tailgate who brings kombucha and asks if the brisket is locally sourced. Gutfeld roasted him with the precision of a drone strike. Folksy, please. This guy's about as relatable as tofu at a monster truck rally. Because nothing says working-class hero like quoting Noam Chomsky in a fleece vest.
Hey, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it. They shake. He pulls her close and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh, yeah, weird. I've seen warmer embraces between Chris Christie and a salad.
Meanwhile, Minnesota's rural communities are practically screaming into the void like someone trying to cancel dial-up internet in 2025. They wanted a leader who understood their world. Tractors, real jobs, maybe a church potluck or two. Instead, they got Tim Walz, a guy who seems to think Greater Minnesota begins at the edge of the nearest bike lane and ends wherever the kombucha taps run dry. This isn't leadership, it's lifestyle branding with bonus buzzwords. Walz governs like he's live streaming a TED Talk called Empathy Through Bureaucracy. Gutfeld's final blow. He dubbed Walz the IKEA governor comes in a box. Missing screws, assembly required, and by the end, you're crying on the floor, staring at a wobbly structure, wondering if you accidentally built a metaphor. And honestly, he nailed it. Walz is the kind of guy who thinks policymaking is a Pinterest board filtering reality through hashtags, interpretive dance, and oat milk. Gutfeld saw through it all like he had X-ray goggles at a nonsense convention. Every bloated policy, every word salad soundbite, every sanctimonious sermon disguised as leadership, he dismantled it with surgical sarcasm and the precision of a caffeinated hawk. He didn't just roast. Tim Walz slow-cooked his entire oatmeal-flavored brand of governance into a soggy, unrecognizable mess. And the best part, Walz probably walked away thinking it was a TED Talk tribute. Minnesota deserves better than a glorified group project in khakis, and Gutfeld with every punchline sharper than a DMV pencil reminded. The country that behind the fleece vest and passive-aggressive smile stands a man who governs like he's reading expired instructions from a broken IKEA cabinet, confused, underwhelming, and missing half the screws.